So did you see that thing I sent on the group about Abridge, that link? Abridge is apparently looking at a $5 billion valuation with a massive new raise.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. I've seen that. I don't get it because just a few months ago they did a $200 million raise. So why do they need more money?
I mean, so I think if I recall correctly, the article is speculating that, and you and I have talked about this. I literally say this all the time. The technology that Abridge is doing, like, you know, ambient listening and being able to take in information and then put it out in a specific format is completely uninteresting. We kicked out that feature in 2 days, right? There's tons and tons of competition. So they have a leg up. I think they're doing the smart thing. They have a leg up. They got market share very quickly.
Brand name.
Yeah, they got in very deep with Epic, and they are the clear winner of the race between, let's say, them and even like Deep Scribe and Nuance, which is technically Nuance is technically way bigger than them. They were bought by Microsoft for what, $20 billion, you know, but they're not, I don't think they're winning the race. Abridge is the clear winner. So now that technology is essentially being commoditized down to the bottom, it's very easy for people to do. The switching cost is zero and the cost is going to go down to zero. So if you're in Abridge, if you're in Abridge, you're looking right now and you're saying, okay, if we don't get ahead of this and we don't become the next version of what this needs to be, then we're going to go down the tubes. There's nothing keeping people with us. So, the article speculated that they're going to go into like the RCM space, which is revenue cycle management, maybe scheduling and kind of, you know, things that can start working around. I think that's definitely the smart move for them. I don't know if a $5 billion. So yeah, I think they'll probably raise a bunch of money and start acquiring some startups and start bringing them in.
Yeah, I think that would probably be the only explanation, because how do they go from 200, like it seems like suddenly they had a wake up moment, like a light bulb moment, because if a few months ago they did a raise for 200 million, why do they need to do another raise now?
Yeah.
You know, why not do the raise that they needed then? Was it they didn't have the credibility? I think it's probably more of like, oh my God, we need much more money.
But what do you need money for? You can't.
Probably acquiring.
It's got to be acquisitions,
right?
because there's
build
not so much.
Build up a company,
how much staff can you use already?
200 million is enough to build up a very large company, and you can't scale faster than that within a few months. So it's probably about acquiring. It's probably they probably that light bulb suddenly, you know, turn on. Oh my God, we need to acquire a few companies and double down on our momentum of being a market leader. And
start becoming a workflow tool, and not that's I'm telling you, 2026 is going to be all about workflows, and that's where, you know, I think we're obviously really well positioned, and we're seeing our success is because we're a workflow tool. But that's what they need to become, because the switching cost between Nabla and Abridge is nothing at the end of the day. If they're both in Epic, it's an app on your phone. You switch it from this to that. You disconnect your EHR from this to that. Like, there's no switching costs, and they can't charge. There's not enough value in it to charge.
Right.
You know, I mean, obviously they can charge, but I mean, you can't charge enough money to actually make it make sense.
Right, because soon you're going to have to use ChatGPT for this stuff too. He's going to say, here, my role right now is that I'm doing clinical stuff. You know, you record
all ChatGPT needs to do is become, you know, create a HIPAA compliant thing and then allow you to connect to an EHR. If they build that integration, they can allow you to do a lot of these workflows. And by the way, I don't know if you saw, in addition to this, but Epic just released something called Launchpad, if I recall correctly. I think it's called Launchpad, where they're basically helping folks create AI workflow tools inside of Epic.
Oh, nice.
So, or like help them train. I didn't read it fully. It was on X, but it was like help them take from like ideas to actually moving. But something like that, I don't think. I mean, you've got these innovation departments at health systems, and you've got these like, you know, the folks that are supposedly focused on these things. But I don't think there's a very good track record for health systems actually like taking ideas like this and taking it all the way through. Maybe I'm wrong.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think they're quite busy with the 14 million problems that they're dealing with in healthcare. I don't even know if they have the brain space to think outside of the box.
You know what I don't like about this Abridge thing? Like, if I was running that company, like if you look at the story of Epic, like they built themselves slowly, they were profitable, they built up the credibility. Here, when you take such a big bet, you're basically making a big promise and a big bet that if I'm going to be able to justify that $5 billion valuation, then everything is going to make sense. But otherwise, it's going to be an epic failure, because...
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. So like...
Failure by Epic.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, I see like these startups that they raise so much money. Sometimes, you know, time is of the essence. You know, you don't have time to spend out 10 years and build your company slowly. But that approach of like building it at your own pace, as you're profitable, choosing your own path, not making big bets that you don't know. Like, no one really could predict the future. Like, most likely that Abridge might fail, whatever they're trying to do, whatever they're probably trying to get into Epic territories somewhat, and Epic just like has a massive advantage there in so many ways.
The flip side to that is look at them against one of the other 14 million different soap note generation startups that are out there. They're very clearly failing. So, I mean, I guess define success and define failure. That's really the question.
It's
right?
a doom loop because they're already in a place where they probably overpromised to investors what the valuation is going to be based on initial traction, initial excitement, without realizing ultimately this is all commoditized. There's no real thing here. So they have to, startups get into this doom loop where they raised a lot of money. They promised they're going to be a $1 billion unicorn. Like that's what they were aiming for. Now they have pressures from the VC to try something new, as opposed to saying, you know what, we won't be a unicorn. We'll be a $100 million business.
Okay, so that's what I said. You have to define success. What is success as a startup? Right. So if you're defining success as living a good life and and basically being able to take care of yourself and your employees, then you don't really have to be that big. If you're a company throwing off a couple $1 million a year in net, you're fine. You're golden, right? But that's not what these companies want to go for. These companies want to be that multi-billion-dollar company.
I mean, I don't really think that they want to be that. I think that they think the only path to they think that's the path to success, and they don't realize the failure rate is so high that they can be super, super wealthy and much more guaranteed to be wealthy and successful at going at a slower pace. But they're in this whole VC Silicon Valley echo chamber that it's like go big or go home. It's I don't know. I think it's so sad because I like to see it because great things sometimes happen from these kind of startups, but I think so many, like 90% of them, if they just would have gone a little slower, make smaller bets, they would have survived, as opposed to 90% of them that don't survive.
Listen,
they would have survived and they would have slowly grown, and over 20 years they may have been where they were, but they for sure wouldn't have crashed. And what you do is when you make these big bets, 99 out of 10 times you crash. And for a VC, they don't care because they have 50, 100 companies in their portfolio, so it's like 10 of them are gonna hit home run. But for the founder himself, that's burning those nights, compromising on their family, on everything else in their life, which is a massive cost, and then to find out that this whole thing failed is just devastating. And I think people don't realize it until they're behind. It's behind them. I mean, obviously, some people are like, "This is my mission in life. This is the only thing I'm interested in." Good for them. But I think for a lot of people, it's just a miscalculation and a misinformation because they're in this Silicon Valley VC, bubble that they're not realizing the reality is very different than how it's told to them.
Could be. I mean, I don't agree with that fully, but the biggest person, so to speak, to support your argument is Epic. Like Epic, how long did it take them to make their first $1 million or something? It was like a ridiculous amount of time.
Many years, yeah.
They never did M&A. They never bought anything. They only built everything. They never took investors. They never, never going public, never taking investors. And they built a business over, year over year over year over year. That was what that whole Acquired podcast was about.
Right.
And now they are the monster in healthcare. But Judy Faulkner is not the VC path, meaning like she's not now she looks like a celebrity in retrospect, but she didn't live a, celebrity CEO startup life. There was nothing exciting about the last 50 years of her life. Maybe the last 10 years, you know what I mean? Maybe
very
the last
exciting.
10 years.
She's built amazing companies. She enjoyed it every day.
But most people in today, they're looking for attention. They're looking for media. You want to start something, and then you want to have some massive exit. And then even if you only profited, let's say, on your personal life, even if you only profited a couple $1 million or tens of millions of dollars, that's still, a really good amount of money. But now you're the guy that built up this company that went public or that did whatever at a multi-billion dollar valuation. And now your road, the path is wide open for you. I mean, especially in today's day, I know there's a bit of a digression, but especially in today's day with like even politics, like look at half of the administration right now are coming from like venture capital and massive companies. Rubicon has tons of people in the government. Anyway, so I think it just depends on like what's your definition of success. But there is definitely a path that does not work without VC money.
If you know that nine out of 10, no, okay, there's two different extremes. But I'm just saying, why do you want to put in all that effort? I mean, we've gotten a sense of what we're not even a hyper scaling VC type startup, and we know what it's like to be under pressure, right? Imagine these guys are 10 times under pressure because they're trying to really scale. They're doing they're pumping a lot of money, a lot of marketing, a lot of artificial acquisition of customers just to kind of get the wheels, the gears moving and showing that they're getting revenue. And that creates a lot of artificial pressure that, in a very short period of time, it's way, way, way harder than what we're going through. So imagine going through all that. Imagine, being stressed out, putting everything else in your life on pause, being late nights, making tough decisions that no one's there to help you with. And you only have, a 10% or a 5% chance of succeeding, and otherwise you crash. Like, does that make rational sense? I think absolutely not. And I think it's not like either that or epic approach. I think there's a medium approach where when you're making revenue, when you're cash flow positive, and you're like, okay, we have our feet in the ground, we're successful, but now we want to, move on to this next stage, and we'll need, $20 million will help us to get there. And we can do it in a very risk averse, in a very sensible way that won't, even if it doesn't succeed, it's not going to hurt our business. That, I think, is a very reasonable approach, and a lot of companies do that. But this whole VC mindset of like raising and raising and raising, when you're not even cash flow positive, when you don't really have the evidence that your product is really going to stick,
I don't know.
The unit economics make sense.
What's their revenues? Let's see. I don't think they're gonna collapse.
But Abridge is okay. I mean, I'm picking Abridge, but Abridge right now they could be making money because they were the first.
What is Abridge's revenue?
That's not a public company, so
yeah, they'll have some sort of data. $7.6 million in 2023. As of 2025, their estimated revenue is $129.3 million. So that's a very, very different story. Very, very different story than take, Hippocratic AI that I do think will go bust with their $1.5 billion valuation, $6 million in revenue, which is probably much less than that. This doesn't feel like a company to me that's fluff. It feels like a company that capitalized correctly on pretty early on, got really on a new market trend, got a lot of market share, got in deep with Epic, and I think this move is a very good move on their part because now they're already seeing the next chapter and saying, okay, how do we stay ahead of what's coming? I don't see that from, I think it's a very different story than like I said, like a Hippocratic, which basically I think is betting on the wrong thing. So it's what are you betting on?
So that's two separate things. I'm not talking about the bad products and bad companies. I'm saying even good companies like Abridge, this whole path of VC, like they have to take big bets now because that's kind of what they signed up for, and that's what their VCs want. They have no choice. They can't just sit there and say, oh well, what's wrong with making $200 million a year and diminishing slightly as people are taking some of our business? It's so much money. No, because their investors are saying, well, we want you to be $1 billion a year, and soon you're going to lose that $200 million. You're going to be at $50 million, and if it was our company and we were doing that, we would be like, okay, let's take strategic approaches, slowly get into another space or whatever. But they need to make big bets because that's what they sign up for. And I'm not saying they don't have a good product. I'm just saying it's unfortunate because most likely in 2 years we're going to look back and say Abridge kind of sold for parts to some other company, and I think that's very, very likely because acquiring companies is not easy. It's not an easy thing.
That's one thing I'll definitely agree with you.
Most people fail. They acquire a company, they try to homogenize it into their own company, and it usually fails at that point.
You know what the worst part of M&A is? The worst part of M&A is the people that get lost. The good people at both companies that end up feeling like, this is not what I signed up for. I have seen this literally countless times in massive companies that come together or buy other companies, or there's, whether it's mergers or acquisitions. People come in and really, really good people. They were loyal to their company. They love their company. They've been there for decades. And all of a sudden they're like, this isn't my company. This isn't what I signed up for. This is not my people. And it's honestly, I've seen it so many times at this point that I'm kind of like looking for an example in the opposite. Like I'd love to see an example of like a merger that actually went well and everybody meshed together and everyone found their place. And
there are great stories. I mean, like there's great, like, Google, Adobe, like they're known for, most of their successes are acquiring companies. Like most of Google's successes are.
I was talking to one this week, and it literally felt like, and I was talking to this person about this. I don't know if you ever watch Parks and Rec. You ever watch Parks and Rec? There's this like whole, I don't know, it's a whole season or something. But Parks and Rec is about this. It's a show about like some regional little tiny town Parks and Rec department. And anyway, basically, they're the neighboring town, and they hated each other, whatever. But the neighboring town basically went bankrupt. So they had to merge the departments. So they're merging two Parks and Rec departments, and they have the same person, the same role twice in every single at every single department in that department. And so they're trying to mesh, and it's just like, it's about government, but it's so applicable to this whole thing. This is literally what it feels like, where you have like Ron, and this person, and it's just whatever, but it's very sad.
By the way, speaking of mergers, have you seen the Johnny Ive and OpenAI thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
What is that? Is that the? I did. I saw it. Yeah, it's like him, Sam Altman's voice. They're driving through Manhattan or something.
Yeah, they're driving.
What is it? I saw it as an ad, by the way. They're running ads on it.
Right. They're hyping up this new product. So Johnny Ive is like the legendary Apple designer. He like designed, the maybe Shlomo could fill us in here.
MacBooks, iPad.
Yeah, I'm one of the original, I think, Macintoshes.
Everything until Steve Jobs passed away was designed by Johnny Ive.
Right, he was like
even a little bit after.
So he was like the genius designer that Steve Jobs, I assume, hired and held on to.
Yeah, I mean they worked together on everything. They were like.
So he's like, think of him as like a master designer of like the best company of building products, beautiful products ever, right?
Products, UI, like all of it, yeah.
Yeah. So him and Sam Altman have been supposedly cooking for a year, building some new hardware. Okay. My guess is, my understanding at least, I'm reading between the lines, they're trying to tackle what's the new paradigm for smartphones? What's going to replace smartphones in the age of AI? Yeah, so basically Johnny Ive and Sam Altman are trying to figure out what. Supposedly they're
so he's working, a product designer.
Well, but they bought his company. They bought one of his companies for $6.5 billion.
IO. It's called IO. And they're merging.
It's not even his main company. It's like a different name he just made up basically. And then his design firm is gonna be working on all the OpenAI products, and he's gonna be head of design or leading design at OpenAI basically.
Hardware.
So supposedly they're also working on hardware.
I mean, his main genius is hardware. Yeah.
Interesting.
I just think they think he's genius because he has a British accent.
No, he is. He's a brilliant.
Listen, Shlomo would know.
He's I mean, I'm a big fan of his. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Like.
It's funny because I started seeing recently like more people poking fun at their UI. Like I saw our friend Brendan Keeler was saying the biggest travesty or something in the whole AI story is that Sam Altman convinced everybody that ChatGPT is the peak UI for Gen AI, and everybody now's copying the ChatGPT thing, and he's like, it's terrible. So
why? It's pretty good. What's wrong with it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind it. I mean,
they're excellent company, OpenAI. The way they execute,
they're
incredible on all level.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting like beautiful, amazing things to come out with this partnership with Ive. Like hardware is a very hard thing, and they're trying to change a core technology that we're using every day, and they're going to make a big bet, which may work, may not, but it's going to be fun to see what they come with. They say next year they're going to come out with it, which probably means in 2 years.
Right.
But they're announcing it in a week, so we'll see.
They're announcing in a week?
That's what they said, I think.
So they're prompting up, they're warming up, they're queuing up the...
They're running ads on it, which I thought was strange. I mean,
they're trying to
detail, but
because they want to probably do a raise too.
It was really funny seeing... Where did you see the video? On Twitter or YouTube? On X? Or?
I saw it on X, I believe.
On X, all the comments are like, wow, this is amazing, whatever. And then if you go to YouTube, everybody is just making fun of it.
Oh, really?
Like, every comment is like, wow, way to talk about something without actually showing anything.
Yeah.
It's like, I still have no idea what this video was supposed to be about.
What about
shows you the intelligence gap between YouTube?
What about
people
Google's thing is making massive news?
It's the community.
Did you guys look at it like deeply?
IO? Yeah, I watched it.
So, do you have a mic?
Yeah, I have a mic.
Okay, awesome. So, what are your thoughts on this whole Google thing?
I thought it was very.
It's funny because the week before, what's his name, Sundar?
Yeah,
Sundar was sat down with
All In.
Yeah, with David Freeberg from All In.
Oh, he did?
And David Freeberg was like, so did you guys miss are you guys really being disrupted by AI? And then like the next week they finally dropped their thing. But so what was it, Shlomo? I mean, I saw the video thing, which looked really cool. I saw some small tidbit. Here's what I saw. I saw the instant translation between languages, which is a technology that we're actually working on as well, which is cool to see that it's getting there. And then I saw like the live thing, like there was like a demo of like somebody walking down the street and chatting with Gemini, I guess, but while looking at stuff and being like, oh, why is this truck so tiny? And Gemini would be like, it's not. It's a regular sized truck, you silly. Like, it was like obvious that it could actually tell what it is and, stuff like that. But what else? What else was there?
So they had, well, I think the coolest thing that they announced was their AR stuff, like AR glasses that they're coming out with. I think that was the coolest.
So that's like in competition with
Meta.
With Meta, yeah.
Their Meta thing. But it actually has a little screen so you can see overlaid on the world stuff. Like they showed Google Maps, you can see a map in your vision of where to walk and things like that.
I thought Meta also has that with their Ray-Ban glasses.
No, there's no screen built in. It's just voice and audio.
No, Meta?
The Ray-Ban glasses, there's no screen.
I'm sure it's AR. I'm pretty sure it's AR.
It's not. No, it's like mixed reality. I don't know what they call it. I'm 99% sure there's no AR.
What do you mean mixed reality? So how is it mixed if you don't see anything?
Basically, it's connected to AI.
Yeah.
And you could talk to it and ask it questions and.
Who are you talking about?
Record
the Ray-Ban?
Videos. Yeah.
The Ray-Ban was not about AI. It was about VR and AR. That's what Meta's main push for is.
But I'm 99%. Let's look it up. I'm 99% sure there's no actual AR in the glasses.
Let's check. I'm pretty sure you're wrong.
What are the differences between Google's new glasses and Meta's glasses?
You can capture and share your world with photos, a video call, a live stream, listen to your favorite playlist, and make a call. It was all from your
Yeah, you're right. So Google's new glasses has a transparent lens overlay, and the Meta's does not.
Yeah, I mean Meta's working on it, but
right. Wow, it's got to be a rough day for Senor Mark.
I think they're way ahead of the game.
You think so?
Sure, yeah. Because they have the Quests.
So the only massive company that doesn't feel serious yet in the AI game is Apple.
Oh yeah, not only they're not serious, they're extremely underperforming. Like they failed so many times. Since ChatGPT 3 came out, what was it? End of 2023.
Like Gemini started off as a joke. Gemini started off as a joke, but to their credit, they put it out. They iterated pretty fast, and they're finally getting somewhere. Apple's just done nothing.
Yeah, but Google has been developing AI for decades already. So they've been. We knew that they're in a pretty good place. Apple didn't really create an AI team. Apple didn't focus on that. And not only that, we're 2.5 years since GPT-3 came out. When the light bulb moment that the whole world realized AI is going to change everything. AI is going to be involved in everyday interaction, and a company like Apple that creates products that people use almost every minute of every day would be the no-brainer of a place to create it. And
right.
They're not able to do anything. They're failing. There's no product improvement that was based on AI. They're still sticking their AI on the Macs and the iPhones, but it's just way underperforming. It's just not good enough, and that's like devastating for them. But
I still think that Google has not figured out like the mesh. Like they haven't figured out how to insert AI into their products in a good way.
They're an innovator's dilemma place because they have good products,
right?
So they don't want to ruin something that they have. You know? So it's like, how do you do it in a way that it doesn't kill the current value that you have?
So on that podcast, the one clip that I saw is he basically, as Sundar basically was saying that they're coming out with like basically a full new search concept. So they are, I guess, gonna attempt to reinvent the search experience or give people an AI version of search that you could choose that's more chatty and more whatever.
Google's in the best place possible from every single company in terms of AI.
Have the most data, probably.
They're leaders in AI development, in models, in training models. They're literally leaders. They're on par with OpenAI, if not better in certain ways, maybe worse in certain ways, but pretty much in there. They're leaders in hardware manufacturing. They're making their chips. They make the chips for their AI, so they have a massive, price advantage over NVIDIA over OpenAI that needs to pay NVIDIA. They have the distribution on a scale of Android. A few billion phones. How many billion phones out there? So they have a massive advantage over
They
OpenAI.
control all that? Well, I guess because they all have Google.
They're Android, they're Google. They have Chrome. They have a distribution like no one has. So they have the market share, they have the people, they have the technology in terms of the hardware for GPUs and the AI. So they have all the
components.
They have the they have the goods, and all in a way that no other company has, because OpenAI does not even. OpenAI has some distribution, but nothing on the scale of Android, and they don't have the they don't have the smartphone, so they don't really have you. The switching cost is not that huge compared to having the Android. And then when you look at Microsoft, doesn't really have the distribution. Yeah, they have the Office 360 and whatnot, but it's and they have Windows, but it's not really the same way as Android. And also they don't have their own AI on the scale that that Google has. So I think Google is in the best position, and they're taking it slowly. They have time to learn from other people's mistakes of execution. I think they don't have to nail it right now. They can just gradually, incrementally add it in places where it's clear to them that they need to in their Google Docs or wherever, and slowly add value, because they have the luxury of doing that people are not suddenly dropping their products because of new AI thing. People are going to try things, but ultimately they have such an advantage over any other company in so many ways that they have the luxury. They have everything queued up. They have the AI, they have everything there. They just need to pay attention to the behavior and how people want things, and then slowly put things in the right place. So I think Google is going to be like, in a few years, we're going to look back and be like, Google is the company that took over. That really blew it out of the park in terms of AI. Like they had the biggest success out of it, I think, from all these big hyperscalers that we're talking about right now. That's my guess.
It's starting to feel more and more like Apple really was just Steve Jobs, and it kind of died with him. And the company, I mean, Tim Cook is, I guess, a good CEO, but I guess Apple's success, and this is a completely non-knowledgeable take. Okay, so this is a very uneducated take, but everything you hear about early days with Apple and the way that they broke into the market and the genius of the way that they market it was all about creativity. It was all about being outside of it was an art. Apple was really it was an artist. It was an art company. It was based off this, the way that they started. Everything you hear that was great about Apple at the beginning, the way that they convinced people that it's really cool to walk around with these wires sticking out of their head, which was totally not a thing before then. And the way that they did this very simplistic advertising, like every single thing that you hear that was like, this is what Apple did that was genius, it was an art form. And that's not a business, that's art. When the artist dies, like if Van Gogh was a company, then I'm sure there could be a successor that would run his paintings and rent them out and do a good job with kind of keeping the business going, but you can't paint anymore,
So Steve Jobs planted the seeds, and then Tim Cook came in, I think, as a brilliant business person and made a lot of revenue, but also the company lost its taste, it lost its vision, and also it actually alienated
its soul.
Yeah, lost its soul. It also alienated a lot of people because they became really greedy. On the App Store, until recently, like if you wanted to put your app on Apple, you had to use their payment system,
like 30%,
and you had to pay 30% of your revenue on that app. So if your profit on your product is, let's say, 60% in the software world, half of that is going to Apple. Half of your profit is going to Apple. Why? Because they have the App Store. So that's greedy on a level that made so many people mad, and it's beyond any reasonable number that I think is going to backfire on them. A lot of people hate them. A lot of people hate Apple for what they did, and I think they lost their thing. I'm just a Mac user. I don't subscribe to the Apple ecosystem. Never did, never will. But I think this is a chapter where probably we're going to see some new hardware, some new innovation on what a new phone, what the replacement of the phone looks like over the next few years.
Right.
And I think Apple's is going to be a declining ship. You see, like Warren Buffett pulled out a lot of money from Apple over the last year.
Oh yeah.
I think like all indications are that they were at their peak, and now they're at a descent, and they're going to be one of these like Kodak companies that was like, they were an amazing company and they just had a slow death. And I'm sure Steve Jobs is rolling in his grave, but not much you can do about it. Listen, great companies very rarely last
more than
a couple of decades or 100, or definitely not more than a century. It's very, very rare.
Yeah.
I think Microsoft and Satya are doing an amazing thing of how he revived Microsoft, and it's such a leader. But yeah, he's a fierce leader. Tim Cook is not fierce. Tim Cook is, I think he's very super calculated, super smart, and he knows exactly what he's doing, but he's not fierce, and he's not innovative. That's my take, but I may be wrong.
Tim Cook was the operations guy. He was the COO.
And then he stepped into
and
CEO.
He was great at basically optimizing everything.
Steve Jobs picked him, I think.
Yeah, Steve Jobs picked him
as successor.
Could be maybe
he's
Steve
an optimizer.
Jobs.
He's a numbers guy. He'll come in and say, let's tweak this, let's sell this, let's raise the price here, let's make
exactly
a product in India, in China, let's do this, let's raise here, let's sell it for this. And I'm sure he's a great he's a good enabler for smart people to, if they have a good idea, he'll say, yeah, let's see how the numbers look, let's see how this could pick up. But he's very calculated, I think, and calculated in it can be very contradictory to innovative and allowing to be disruptive. And I think he just doesn't have that right, ingredient in his personality. He's what they call a peacetime CEO. There's concept of a peacetime and a wartime CEO.
Yeah.
Right now, Apple needs a wartime CEO, and he's someone that's going to be there and say, what are the big bets we need to make? How do we make those teams that can tackle it and with most likelihood of succeeding? And he's just not that kind of person. He's just an optimizer, So I think that's very sad to see, but just a cycle of life, Yep.
Sounds like basically Steve Jobs was essentially like an artist genius who then played the role as CEO, and he did it well. And Tim Cook is a COO who's trying to play CEO. Yeah. It's like, what are you really and what are you doing? And it's okay if you're a genius. Like I just saw a clip with who's the Mark Benioff? Benioff?
Yeah,
How do you pronounce his name?
Salesforce.
Yeah, the Salesforce guy. So he was saying how Steve Jobs had a big impact on him, and they would hang out. And he said how Steve once called him into his office, and he called him down to whatever, and he said he was showing him the iPad, and he was like, "Here, this is what we're doing now. This is what we're focused on." And he basically was telling him, it was sitting on a coffee table, and he said, we only have one A team at Apple. And because we only have one A team, we're only focused on one product at a time. So for the last 10 years, I've been focused on, or whatever it was, I've been focused on the iPhone. And now we're going all in on this iPad. And this is the only thing we're going to build. And then the thing he said after that was, you see this on my coffee table, because we only have one A team, we're never going to have more products at Apple than can fit on my coffee table. It was like his level of focus. This is just, this is the one thing that we're going to become obsessed with. Anyway.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.